Hey everyone, I'm Derek Mong from Carrot & Co. We're an authorized retailer for Seiko watches, among many other luxury watch and jewelry brands in Flushing, Queens, New York. Today, I have a very special guest with me. I have Mr. Munehisa Shibasaki. He's the president and CEO of Seiko USA by the week and Fisherman by the weekend.
Hi Derek, thank you very much for having me today for your YouTube video. I'm very excited to talk about Seiko today. I am Munehisa Shibasaki of Seiko, and I came to the United States about 4 years ago. I originally joined the company Seiko headquarters in 1992, so I knew more than quarter century in the single company of Seiko. I really love Seiko brand, and I'm very proud and honored to be part of Seiko. But I actually realized I'm getting a vintage Seiko guy now.
Yeah. I see you brought some pieces here that you can share with us. So I actually have a question. If you could only choose one Seiko watch, which watch would you keep in your collection?
It's always a hard question actually, but I really consider last night and cannot decide one. But so I will bring two pieces today. And one is the vintage King Seiko mechanical watches. The other one is the SLQ001. Finally, I decided to pick SLQ001. SLQ001 is the limited edition kinetic chronograph. I believe that they introduced 1998 Basel Fair. I love this watch because of very unique face and kinetic chronograph movement. And some of my friend memories in it. This is my very special watches.
That's amazing. And I've never seen the SLQ001 in person. Apparently it's very rare, so it's very cool you brought it here. The dial layout actually looks like a speedometer of like a car.
Yeah,
has different
instrument panel, right?
Yeah, that's awesome. I also brought a vintage Seiko with me. I am just getting into vintage, but I actually got this from a friend of mine named Ricky. This is a Seiko Astron quartz with the day, and it's one of the earliest examples with that snowflake dial. It's so beautiful the way the dial is done. I believe this was probably towards the mid to late 1970s.
Yeah, early quartz time, I think.
Yeah, so this has been my introduction to Seiko vintage, but I'm a lover of Seiko modern vintage, and I know we have some fun modern stuff to talk about today too.
Okay.
So I noticed you're wearing an interesting watch on your wrist today, and I am also aware that you're a fisherman. So I wanted to ask you, do you have a lucky fishing watch?
Okay, let me introduce the watch I wear today. It's the SPB143. This is the new model for 2020 and a series of modern interpretation of our first diver, a 62 mass. I love this watch because of the size that perfectly fit in my wrist. 40.5 millimeter diameter is good to me, and I really love the overall design. This is the very authentic diver's look, but a little bit the taste of vintage, and I think this is the perfect daily use diver's watch. And actually, I picked up this watch for the last weekend, my fly fishing, and I don't know the reason why, but probably the luck of this watch. I fished the 7 and 8, good size brown.
Wow, that watch looks very familiar. Oh, I'm actually wearing the Seiko SPB149. So this is the limited edition version that came out for 2020 to celebrate the 55th anniversary for Seiko dive watches. So I love everything you just mentioned about this watch, the vintage styling. It really has that kind of appeal from the original 62 Mas onto this here. So can you actually tell us a little bit about the Prospex collection and the direction for Seiko?
Yeah, Seiko Prospex. The Prospex name came from professional specification. So Seiko aimed to create Prospex collection for serious usage. Probably you know that every single piece of Seiko Prospex diver's watch all certified ISO standards. That is one of the examples. Let me start the history of Prospex. History of Prospex starts 1960s. When the underwater watch is not so widely available in the world, Seiko introduced its Japanese very first diver's watch in 1965. So that is 62 Mas.
So speaking of 62 Mas, I see that you actually brought original 6217, or also known as the 62 Mas. Mas standing for automatic SelfDater. I believe this watch was innovative at the time because, as you mentioned, it's Seiko's first dive watch in 1965. but also it was one of the few watches that had a quick set date in it, and let alone it's also a dive watch, 150 meter water resistant, beautiful thin profile, thin bezel, gray dial, and it's so cool to see it actually next here with the SLA017 and the modern versions here too.
So 62 mass is very important piece for Seiko. This is the beginning of the story of Seiko Prospex. 62 mass became very popular when the member of the Japanese Antarctic Research Expedition used it for their program between 1966 to 69. So 62 mass completed its very important mission without any technical problem. So later, historical model like high-beat divers and second divers is also went to the Antarctic with the different members. So they choose Seiko brand because of the reliability. Not only the project, but also the Japanese famous explorer and climber like Naomi Uemura and Ken Noguchi, they selected the Seiko timepiece simply because of the same reasons. And we are very important to having a great relationship with those professionals and take part in the project because we obtain the very important feedback from those professionals. And those feedback is we utilize for the future product development and improvement of the current models. So that is tradition of a Prospex collection.
Wow. And I actually can see the progression from the original 62 mass, and later, like you mentioned, it was built originally for divers, but it was able to survive these expeditions in the Antarctic and survive different environments. So it was really built as a purpose-filled tool, and it can now today, when I see the modern versions, it's that same vintage design, but it has modern functionality, such as the SLA017. So for a long time, I don't believe I've seen any references using a similar case design to the 62 mass until half a century later in 2017, the SLA017 comes out, and it's a recreation of the original 62 mass, but now with modern technologies. Now it's redesigned with a 8L35 caliber that's produced in Shizuki Ishii Watch Studio in Morioka, Japan, which is the highest level of where Seiko produces their mechanical watches and also where Grand Seiko produces their mechanical watches. And then further on, I see now you also brought the 55th anniversary, which is this year in 2020, the SLA037 and the SLA043. So both of these are now more improvements to that original design, starting with the SLA037. This is now a high beat version, so it has the 8L55, still produced, hand assembled in the Shizuku Ishii Watch Studio, and now it has a beautiful blue-gray dial. And I was aware that it's the first time that Seiko is using ever brilliant steel in these models, which is a highly corrosion and scratch resistant metal, but also it actually appears brighter, almost like white gold on the wrist.
Yeah, that's right. That ever brilliant steel is probably the first time for the watch company to use in that watch case. The reason why it is very hard, and as you mentioned, very the high corrosion resistance. That material is widely used for the very deep sea structures and very difficult to forming to the watch case. But because of the long years of history of Seiko watchmaking, we could perfectly make it for this anniversary watches.
So I also see here we have the modern reinterpretations of the 62 mass, which the SPB 143, the 147, and the 145, which is, and one of them you're wearing and one of them I'm wearing as well, in the 149. And you can even see it here. So my question is, Seiko this year in 2020 has produced new versions of the Alpinist, the new Seiko 5, new divers. So how does Seiko in a 1 year still be able to produce so many different watches for everyone, but still at the same time stay original to its roots?
Yeah, they're not limited to the particular collection like Prospex, Presage, or Seiko 5 Sports. As you know, that the Seiko is one of the very few real watch manufacturer company, and our every production process is the in-house. So, for example, watch designing, and movement designing, drawing, assembling, testing, finishing, everything, every process in one company. That is a huge pride of Seiko. And we have a long history of watchmaking. We have ton of a lot of knowledges and experiences. Also, we have very capable staff like engineer, designer, and craftsman. So in order for us to using those very important Seiko's asset and followed by our founders, Mr. Kintaro Hattori's the spirit, always one step ahead of the rest. We would like to keep producing something very fine new timepieces in order for us to meet you and our end users' expectation.
So the word in-house means a totally different thing to Seiko than it does for other brands. For example, for other brands out there, when they say in-house, they mean they just produced or just cased the watch in their manufacturer. But for Seiko, having their own manufacturers or designer, engineers, producing parts, production, this meaning of in-house is actually much more expansive. And I think this is really the true meaning of in-house compared to someone who just cases a movement that's not original to their brand. So that's, high respect to Seiko for doing that. And personally myself, I'm a huge fan of Seiko and many watches in general. And I want to know, how does Seiko keep up with its audience? Because the Seiko community is very strong online, and how does Seiko communicate with the community?
Yeah, I really appreciate that there are so many Seiko fan group and enthusiasts existing in the United States market, and they are loving the watches. And actually, that our fan group put a lot of nickname on our watches. So I'm very surprising, and how loved Seiko watch in the United States is very appreciated. And we organize some events, sometimes the watch event, or this year it's a bit difficult, but then I have a chance to communicate with fan group directly, and we are seriously listening to what they want about Seiko, including negative and positive requirements. But I would like to continue to keep communicating with the fan group and to feedback our production. That is probably the key to success for Seiko in this country.
Yeah, I see now online there's some groups on like Facebook or some forums where, for example, Seiko watches, and it's actually really nice, even though we're in a year where it's hard to meet up with people and do Seiko meetups or watch meetups, the community is still very strong and still talking about watches every day. And so it's always fun to communicate, and actually I learn a lot too when I participate in these.
Yeah, actually the Seiko fan group knowledge is phenomenal. Yeah. Someone is much better knowledge than us. Yeah. Our PR department is sometimes annoying because they know well about everything about Seiko history. So amazing.
Yeah. Well, we hopefully would love to do some events with Seiko in the future once it's safe to do so. And we can't wait for Seiko to do some more events in the future as well. And I just want to close up this interview. So thank you so much, Shiba, for coming here to Carrot & Co. to our store to do this interview. It's been such a pleasure hosting you here. And thank you so much for bringing these original 62 Mas and all the new pieces here as well.
Thank you very much, Derek. And this is a great opportunity for me too. Thank you very much.